now 3 down. We're going to move on to the 4th, which is identity. I think that's Brian on the clicker, by the way. Give him a minute. He's got it sorted. We're on to identity. Now, I don't know about you guys. When I think about identity, I think about bringing a web page up, clicking in the bottom corner, clicking on Ghostery, and looking at all of the different companies that are tracking me, and to some extent, freaking out a little bit. Thinking, I don't want to pass my data to these companies if this is what identity means. So how are we going to fix it?
Well, first off, I think there's a significant misconception, both in the broader internet community and probably in this industry, that just because all those trackers show up in Ghostery doesn't mean they're actually tracking you. I think the fundamental thing a lot of these little pixels are doing is just trying to sync between all the different ad tech platforms, because we all have to communicate through RTB and we need to know who the user is. So the lack of even a common cookie is a major problem. Imagine if you could get all these ad tech companies on a common domain where you just drop one cookie on a user and everybody shares it. All of a sudden, Ghostery would lose 100 of those trackers.
Yeah, you realize that's never going to happen.
Well, I think it can happen. So I think we can get a lot of the leading ad tech companies and all the companies in this ecosystem to do it because of privacy, because of GDPR, and because it dramatically improves the consumer experience.
Okay.
But you think I'm naive?
I don't think it's going to happen.
All right. Well, how about an open identity coalition? All right. We're going to have a shared open ad serving domain that anybody who wants to use can. All right. We're going to use this to make sure we enforce privacy by design, meaning there's one place that consumers have to go in order to opt out or set their preferences. And of course, if you go back to the GDPR conversation, it's a lot easier if you don't have to hop between tens or hundreds of different domains. And this becomes a foundational building block for people-based marketing. It allows us to actually connect across the entire ecosystem between anyone who wants to identify a person. And this is not happening within walled gardens. This is happening out here on the open internet for all of our benefit. So to prove that we can do this, I'd like to bring out Patrick McCarthy, who is the AppNexus leader for all of our partnership work, who's been leading the effort on our side to pull together this coalition. Patrick?
All right. Thank you, everyone. Nice little lead in there by Brian and Nigel. And to prove that point, that we could actually get the industry rallied around this, we brought some amazing special guests here with us today to talk about the concept that Brian just spoke about. And so I'll introduce them now, and we'll get into some of the details and what we're talking about and what the benefits are. So we've got Dave Yaffe with LiveRamp, Mike Lamb of MediaMath, James Prudhomme of Index Exchange, Matt Kaiser of Live Intent, and David Gosen of Rocket Fuel. So some of the industry's best companies here to talk a little bit more about a shared identity framework and a shared cookie domain space that can really allow us to compete with some of the giants out there that have a deterministic ID and have a domain space that's already pretty well established. So Dave, what are we really talking about here? How does this work?
So thanks for the introduction, Patrick. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail in a kind of non-standard format around what we're doing to make people-based programmatic advertising addressable for the open web. So I'll go through a few slides. But effectively, this whole concept rests on a common identity framework. If you look at what's happened in programmatic since the onset, essentially every company who's existed in programmatic has had their own domain space. What that means is that they all speak a different language. It's like going to the supermarket and trying to order a pear, but every single person who goes to the same supermarket has a different word for the name pear. So it makes it very difficult to actually buy that pear. What we're doing is creating a single word for pear, and we're doing that everywhere, so that everyone can order a pear just by saying pear.
Simple enough.
Yeah. So the benefit of this is it works not just across one device, but it will work across all devices, all channels, and all platforms. And everyone will be able to use one identity for all of that. So effectively, this will be a single ID that will work and govern the identity for an individual across programmatic advertising. To get into a little bit more of how it actually works, we have two pieces of it. The first piece is a universal cookie space. The universal cookie space is a single domain which everyone in the industry will transact upon. We'll all add scale to that domain, and it will allow it to be scaled out more than any other industry domain out there because everyone's adding to it. And then the second piece of it will be Identity Link, which is a framework for a cross-channel identifier, which allows for us to essentially bring that ID across not just cookies, but across all devices and across all channels. So that's the high level of what we'll be doing to create that common identity framework.
Thanks. So Mike, what is the benefit here for marketers? What do they get out of this?
Yeah, good question. Thank you, Patrick. Maybe the first thing to say is at least half of my clients will have no idea what we're talking about. And
I still don't.
Yeah. And that's okay because we're talking about plumbing here. We're talking about making some fundamental changes to the underlying infrastructure that we all inherited from 20 years ago, and that we have built a great ecosystem in an industry on, but that is simply not ready to build the next 10 years of programmatic. So, the first thing I would say is we're doing this work down in the basement, and it's good. It's going to make for a stronger house for the whole thing. Now, those of my clients who do understand what we're talking about, they will immediately recognize the benefits in terms of the precision and reach of their marketing. But what I think they'll be most excited about is the opportunity to take a leadership position here on consumer privacy and preference. As we look out, of course, here in Europe, but increasingly in the US as well, in a very different way, it's very clear to us that if we aren't leading on those issues, we're going to be sorry about it. And so, we've got, of course, a lot to do here in Europe, but I think this is our opportunity to avoid what we're calling the Arkansas problem in the US, which is, absent this, we're going to have to pay a lot of attention to Arkansas. And I love them, but that's one too many regulatory frameworks for me.
Got it. So James, what about sellers? If you're a seller, is this a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah, right. That's always got to remember the publisher. I mean, ultimately, if this achieves mass adoption and is successful, it's going to be a really good thing for sellers. But I believe before that happens, publishers have to be sold on the benefits. They're going to have to really understand, and as a consortium or a cartel, however you want to look at it, we're going to have to clearly articulate the benefits to publishers so that they understand ultimately this will increase monetization, this will put more revenue in their pockets. The efficacy of their own data, I think, is at stake here as well. So there's going to be a long conversation and a lot of education that we're going to have to go through with publishers.
Yeah, that's great. What about, David, what about the consumer?
Yeah, so I think in a world where openness wins, has to win, transparency is critical, and technology is just the enabler. In our world today, collaboration is the byword. One company alone is not going to succeed or survive. So collaboration is absolutely vital. And when we talk about compliance, we talk about privacy, we talk about the opportunity for a consumer who knows even less than the people that we work with. We have to make it simple. And the opportunity to have one unique identifier, one chance to consent, makes it simple. So we have to put the consumer at the center of what we do, because if we make them happy, then what we do with the plumbing in the background is just there. But the critical thing is also we can make content more relevant, we can make targeting more effective, and we can make frequency of advertising and frequency capping even more important. So even though it starts in the back office, if we do it correctly in a collaborative way, the impact at the front end to the consumer should be absolutely supreme in changing their experience as well as we move to a more regulated environment.
Very true. And to Mike's point, I think there's also benefits for marketers and consumers on both sides here, right? The marketer can frequency cap on a more of a universal basis. They can do better storytelling. They can do better attribution, right? If they've got a better sense of identity, it really ties that all together well. And the consumer is not getting hit with the same ads being served, by AppNexus and by Index and by MediaMath and other if there's more of a universal view. So
it almost sounds too good to be true when
Yeah.
everybody wins. But I think the important thing is, and many of us have got our own universal IDs that we use. We have an artificial intelligence platform, we have a cross-device graph, and what we see is actually, from a marketeer's perspective, the return on investment is far greater. So again, if we can do this in the ecosystem collaboratively and everybody wins, then we will take control of what is important to us, and that is, the effectiveness and the service and the returns that we deliver ultimately, to our clients and paymasters.
Yeah. Changing subjects, Matt is obviously the best dressed here with his awesome Live Intent shirt. So Matt, you're the only email guy here, right? And email's obviously been a place that has been different from the rest of the open web as far as the technology that's being used, and obviously it's very deterministic since it's tied to an email address. Are you going to be able to contribute to this, to play in this, like do email in the RTB header bidding space? Like, how does that work, and is that happening?
So this is super exciting for Live Intent. I work with a lot of you right here, and our inventory is available through OpenRTB and also through direct API with brands like LiveRamp. But what's exciting about this is it changes everything in that today we'll be able to work with every one of the consortium members, providing targeting as well as measurement and attribution at the people level. And what that means is we're going to be able to direct more dollars to the publishing brands that make the internet this amazing space that we all enjoy. But equally important, democratizing access to identity for the marketer themselves means that they can reach their customers wherever they're spending time. Irrespective of browser, irrespective of device. And what's so critical about that is it's now going to be possible to do that at a scale that was previously only possible, with walled gardens. So I think what's exciting to me is, I truly believe the largest shift in advertising and marketing since digital itself is this shift from marketing to people, to pixels. And then, of course, the shameless plug is if everybody, joins the consortium, what we're going to be able to do, obviously, is deliver for our customers, which is what's really key.
Very cool. So, Mike, MediaMath has long had a identity product, Connected ID. How does this work with that? Like, how does the shared identity also allow you to have a differentiated product out there as well?
Thank you, Patrick. I'll go back to the same metaphor, a construction metaphor, because obviously, I'm such a DIY guy. We're building the foundation here, right? So recognizing the end device or the end browser sort of consistently over time with precision is the foundation on which we're all building our view of the people-based identity. And this is going to make that a lot easier. It's going to make it easier for us to recognize that device over time. It's going to make it easier for us to be a great customer of LiveRamp's Identity Link product. And it's going to be easier for us to get closer to that true promise of people-based marketing with our Connected ID offering.
That's great. Dave, how does the marketer benefit from your perspective here with what you guys do, onboarding data from marketers? Like, how does this tie together for them?
So I'm trying to think of how I can use a grocery store analogy, but I'm not coming up with anything. I think for a marketer, really what we're doing is we're allowing for, within the bid stream, the communication of these types of IDs in a shared framework. And what that means for us is that it allows for more opportunities. So instead of having some limited coverage, now everyone will have coverage across the entire programmatic ecosystem. So a marketer will have more opportunities to reach their customer everywhere.
That's great. And so I think the audience right now is probably saying, this all sounds really like too good to be true, amazing. Why hasn't this happened before, and is this going to work? So I'm going to ask all 5 of these guys if they think this is going to work, and these companies will be able to all work together to put this together.
I think it's going to work. We're pushing really hard to make this a reality, and I think we have a great base group of companies here, all with common goals. And this has been a long time coming, right? This is something that I think the entire industry has needed, but there hasn't been a really unified effort to get it going, and we're all heads down in getting this done.
That's great. What do you think, Mike?
I am equally enthusiastic and optimistic. Look, I mean, the big thing for me is over time, people come to realize that this is not going to be a source of competitive advantage. This chaos we had down here is only a source of competitive disadvantage relative to the walled garden. So, that light bulb went off a couple years ago. I think people have done a lot of great spade work, to put the concepts together for this. And now we've assembled what I think is a minimally viable set of folks who can get this done.
Yeah, I'll agree. I think Mike said it very well earlier. We have to build the infrastructure to allow the next 10 years of innovation to flourish, right? I think that the companies on this stage and many others in this room have accomplished a lot in the last 10 or 15. But the stakes are really high now. In order to get to the next level, we have to realize that there is no competitive advantage in having an ID space, a proprietary ID space. And there's a lot more advantage in just solving that problem and moving forward. And to kind of build on the grocery store analogy, it's kind of like if a British person walks into Whole Foods in New York and says, hey, can I order some aubergine? And then an American walks into Whole Foods in London and says, can I get some eggplant? That's the conversation that's happening now, right? Everybody wants the same thing. But we don't have the tools to get it there. So we can solve this problem, and I think it's going to be really effective.
Yeah, I can imagine if I was one of the giants that does have this already today, I would kind of be looking at the rest of the ad tech ecosystem and sort of laughing and saying, unless all these people can work together, they have no chance at being able to accomplish the same things we have in being able to help marketers have that people-based view.
The other elephant in the room, and I think this impacts publishers and buyers equally, is GDPR, right? And everyone kind of fundamentally gets what is going to be required to comply with GDPR, but nobody really knows how it's going to happen, and especially the consent issue. There's not a lot of clarity yet from the EU on exactly what consent means or what type of consent is going to be required. But one thing I do know for sure is that given the current infrastructure, no matter how they define consent, none of us are going to be able to comply. And so this is a big step that we all need to take in order to comply with that
universal
legislation.
opt-out. What do you think, Matt? Is it going to work?
Look, I think LiveIntent's lucky. We sit at the intersection of marketing and advertising, as you said earlier. 100% of our inventory is already deterministic. Our problem has been how do we connect to the rest of the ecosystem? And I think what's been proven without a shadow of a doubt by the walled gardens is that in a mobile-first world, identity is the key. So I think we're all doomed if we don't make this work. So I'm a believer that we've got the critical mass to make it work. There's 160 million people in our database alone that we reach on a monthly basis. LiveRamp's database, they reach a couple 100 million people. It's the vast majority of the 245 million people in the US, and then also in Europe, it's now 40% of the UK model. And France is coming along, and Germany is extremely important, and it all comes back to how do you do identity in a privacy-safe way with oversight. And that's what I think is so interesting here is there's a lot of knowledge, and yet it's very difficult for any one company to be successful and to compete on a fair playing field. So.
Yep. Quickly, David, as we're running out of time.
Yeah, so I just think it's about the power of collaboration. We don't actually have a choice. We have to work together to solve this. And I think on the competitive differentiation point, this becomes a forcing function for companies to work out how they use their own individual assets to be more competitive in a world and differentiated in a world where there is greater collaboration. So it should be good from all perspectives.
That's great. And if you hit the next slide, David. So as we said, this is an open industry consortium where as long as companies are willing to play by the set of rules that are still being defined by this group, but as long as they provide with the right privacy, data protections, and are doing everything in the right way, we're open to other companies choosing to join in. OpenX actually even joined last night. We didn't have a chance to teleport someone from OpenX here today. But they're in as well, and we have some others who we've barely talked to, and we are really excited to talk to the rest of you and the rest of the industry about the benefits of this. Many of these companies will be putting out more detail over the next few weeks. I think some blog posts are coming out, some really exciting stuff that will provide more information on it, and we look forward to really making a big difference together. Thank you.